What's up, everybody? I think I'm live right now. It's been a while since I've been live, and I just wanted to say happy holidays to everyone. Welcome to another live stream, which again, I'm still kind of like getting an idea of how to live stream. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. I talk about games that come back to life, old and new games. And today I'm talking about, which is basically what a lot of the internet's talking about, is Spider-Man. But I'm going to tell you right away, no spoilers in this. And actually, we're going to go into no spoilers on the new Spider-Man movie, No Way Home, which I have not seen anyway, so I wouldn't be able to give you any spoilers besides trailers. And I'm not even going to really spoil trailers because I think it's not something that's pretty cool to do anyway. So, but I will say this. If you're and welcome anyone who's watching me live, and thank you for joining. Definitely leave a comment so that I know that you're here, and then I can say hello back as well. Let me make sure I have all of my chat being displayed, which it wasn't initially, so I've got that going. And so let's start off with one of the things that I'm angry about, and one of the things that actually get on my nerves, and that is the fact that we have to, as an audience, avoid uh, pretty much the internet for the next couple of days. And that is pretty frustrating. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I've been a Spider-Man fan since the 90s. Spider-Man fan since, not since like childhood, but really early teen years and throughout my teenage years. I grew to love and cherish the character of Spider-Man and his ongoing story because of one particular series. And I'm sure you've heard of this series before. It's pretty much Spider-Man the animated series. That series to me was the pinnacle of what Spider-Man should be. And I'm sure you're seeing the footage right now, but it is the pinnacle of what Spider-Man is to me. And the actor who played Spider-Man was Christopher Daniel Barnes. He's also well known for like the Brady Bunch movie. He was in that. And to me, whenever I see Spider-Man and whenever I would read a Spider-Man comic, it was really Christopher Daniel Barnes' voice that I would hear. So even in like the arcade games from like the Marvel versus Street Fighter series, I'm not sure if it was really him, but to me, that the actor who played Spider-Man in those games sounded a lot like Christopher Daniel Barnes. If it wasn't him, I actually haven't looked it up. But to me, that was the definitive Spider-Man. It was a definitive Spider-Man voice, and it was pretty much him who made the character of Spider-Man important. So when Tobey Maguire starred in Spider-Man in 2002, early 2002, I was excited because I always wanted to see Spider-Man actually in a movie, actually see Spider-Man like, uh, do his thing in real life. But Tobey Maguire, which a lot of people say, okay, Tobey is the definitive Spider-Man. For me, Tobey Maguire is a nice representation of who Spider-Man was supposed to be, but to me it was still Spider-Man the animated series, Christopher Daniel Barnes, and the way he played him, because it really was an iconic role. And it was really iconic. Actually, one of my favorite scenes from that series was when, now a lot happens, and this is minor spoilers for I guess the show, but but the way this was acted by Christopher Daniel Barnes was a little bit over the top, but it still was pretty like iconic. If you don't know, his Spider-Man's main interest is Mary Jane, love interest, and in the show, it turns out that like she had like disappeared to a different dimension or whatever, and she mysteriously came back. But what ends up happening in the show, that mysterious return of Mary Jane was actually just a clone that was created. So she ends up fading into basically nothing. And she basically says, if the real Mary Jane is anything like me, basically, she loves you more than anything. And then he starts screaming like, no, Mary Jane. And it may have seemed like over the top acting, but in my opinion, that's the way that they carried Mary Jane through that particular scene and through that show was enough, was powerful enough that it made me like tear up when the first time I watched it. I was like in my mid-teens. So for there's no better Spider-Man in my opinion than pretty much that version of Spider-Man. So it's pretty cool, right? And then Tobey Maguire was pretty good in his role, and obviously iconic for many who grew up watching his versions in the movies. And then you had Andrew Garfield play Spider-Man for a couple of movies, and now we have Tom Holland. And I'm very interested in watching the movies, of course, but I don't know if this has happened to you, and definitely let me know in the comments if you're watching this later. The amount of thumbnails and the amount of people saying, oh, here's the ending, or here's, say, you know, somebody shows up. I'm not going to say anything, of course, but a lot of these thumbnails are like, ending explained, and here's the ending, and then screenshots of someone who recorded the movie when they got an early screening, and it just drives me crazy. Oh no, do not give spoilers. What? Don't, if you're here and you're leaving spoilers, you're driving me crazy. But I have seen spoilers like that. For example, I'm not going to repeat it, like we're listed in the chat, like that was like one of the thumbnails, and I couldn't, it drives me crazy because I don't have movie tickets for opening night. I actually reserved it for Tuesday. So I have to avoid the internet, and this is part of the reason why I'm doing a live stream, because I'm going to just kind of like take a hiatus from the internet, from Twitter, from Instagram, from especially YouTube, up until I'm able to see the movie on Tuesday, because it's been infuriating. And it's okay, that one part had already been spoiled for me thanks to thumbnails in the darn on YouTube, where they're just throwing it out there. We're like, this happens, this happens, this happens. And I just want to tell you guys that, you know, I appreciate your fans, but like the amount of respect for spoilers online has been completely disrespectful. I even saw Tom Holland did a video with the other actors from the movie, and they were like, and they called that video no spoilers, no spoilers, and they beg, please don't spoil it. And then what does the internet go and do? When you tell them not to do something, they go and do it. So that has caused an insane amount of frustration for me. And I'm even when I'm going to leave this video posted up on my YouTube channel, but when it's up there, I am not going to at all going to look at the comments on my own video. Let me see. Yep, I have appeared, Ferris Fighter. Nice to see you too. I'm live streaming on my Twitch as well, so on both channels. Good to see you, Hassan. I'm glad that you guys are here watching me live, and yes, it's been a while, and I have to like squint just to see my screen because whatever I'm seeing is so small, so I apologize for that. So, but this is a gaming channel, so even though this is not a movie channel, I still wanted to mention that. But we're going to talk, and I already mentioned who my favorite Spider-Man was, which brought me back to a video that I saw online that I was going to do anyway. I was actually going to edit something very interesting for you guys, but I'm like, since the movie hype is coming out now, I just might as well get my thoughts out there. So I've already started off this video saying that Christopher Daniel Barnes is the definitive Spider-Man. He is just the absolute definitive Spider-Man for me. So whenever I see this cartoon, and it's on Disney Plus right now, and it being represented the way it's represented, I'm like, yes, I want to see what happens with this character, with Christopher Daniel Barnes. Because if you don't know, or if you haven't watched that particular Spider-Man series, like I showed earlier in this video, Mary Jane, the clone Mary Jane dies, but the real Mary Jane like got knocked into like a portal, like a interdimensional portal in that series by Green Goblin. And then Green Goblin gets knocked in there, and then Peter's like all distraught. So then you have like another season or two that plays after that, and it's pretty sad because it's kind of like, what happened to Mary Jane? She didn't really die, but what happens to her? And the frustrating part about that is that, so the series, ends, and there was a lot of controversy over why the series was shut down due to like Fox shutting it down and whatnot. And it was actually planned to have more seasons than it actually did. But when you go to the ending, which is what you're seeing right here, so spoilers for Spider-Man the Animated Series ending, he meets Stan Lee after having the Secret Wars, and Madam Web takes him to another dimension, and he wants to know, like, where are we going next after all of this? And Stan Lee is like excited that he actually met Spider-Man. But then he's like, where to next? And she's like, well, it's time that you get something for you. We're going to take you to find the real Mary Jane Watson. Because it's about time you had rest. And he's like, well, amen to that, fair lady. Amen to that. Like, you wanted to see him, after all his performances, get reunited with Mary Jane. But it never happens. That's where the episode ends. And you're left wondering what happened. How did he find Mary Jane? Where was she? Whatever ended up happening to her? Was she taken somewhere? And even though they had plans to make it a little bit more like, he goes into like the past and then he has to find her and whatever happened to her, it never really explained that, because of course this series just ended. So my least favorite Spider-Man, if you're asking, is it's really hard to actually pinpoint who my least favorite Spider-Man is, because each one has its own quirks, in my honest opinion. So I can't really say that there are too many bad Spider-Man appearances, because they're either pretty good or they're hilariously bad that they're funny and that you appreciate them. But one that I never cared for was the American live action Spider-Man. I never had an attachment towards that Spider-Man. I never like got it, whatever. So anyway, on to my story. So Spider-Man the Animated Series ended. I was sad. Wouldn't hear Christopher Daniel Barnes play that role again, until many years later, when another Spider-Verse was created. Because obviously the last of the series was when it was kind of like a Spider-Verse type of situation. And then a game called Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions came out. And Shattered Dimensions actually, to me, was the first really exciting Spider-Man Spider-Verse form of media that wasn't comic books, because they not only just did a bunch of random Spider-Mans, which Spider-Man the Animated Series did, but there was no real attachment to those other Spider-Men unless you were fans of like the comics. But this game, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which came out for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, took some of the iconic voice actors from the various Spider-Man shows that played them in like 2000s and the 90s, and put them in this game. Now, storyline is as follows. In a museum, Mysterio got a tablet that was like a tablet that activated like interdimensional powers or whatnot. And then Madam Web, just like in the show, appears, and she's like, well, you got to put this thing back together, and it's lost in like different universes. So Spider-Man has to team up with his other Spider-Man like versions and go pretty much put the tablet back together and save the day and stop Mysterio. Now, the amazing thing about that is that the actors who play the different Spider-Man, there's Spider-Man Noir right there. You see Spider-Man from Ultimate Spider-Man with the Venom suit. And then you see Spider-Man 2099, which is Miguel instead of Peter Parker. And then you see the pig Spider-Man, like, a pig? So you knew it was a multiverse. But these different Spider-Man characters, these different Spider-Man were all played by those voice actors who played the Spider-Mans in the cartoons. For example, right here you have the main Spider-Man, who's actually played by the actor, why am I forgetting his name? Doogie Howser. Neil Patrick Harris, who played Spider-Man for when Spider-Man, I think it was the Spectacular Spider-Man that was on MTV for like one season. And Neil Patrick Harris does a great job of playing Spider-Man in that series and in this game. But I didn't come for Neil Patrick Harris to play Spider-Man. He did a great job. But my thing was I wanted to come to see Christopher Daniel Barnes, who I knew, this was the reason that I bought the game. Christopher Daniel Barnes returned as Spider-Man in this game, and I wanted to hear the Spider-Man that was in my head return as pretty much the Spider-Man that I knew. But it was different because he played the Spider-Man noir. And this version of Spider-Man, he's kind of more like a 1920s noir style, like harsh shadows, everything like really desaturated in its own art style. But Christopher Daniel Barnes, you can tell it's him, but he's kind of like a darker, more sinister voice. It's almost like if you mixed him with Batman. And it's funny because these parts of the game actually play out like a Batman series. But it really had me pulled me back into like Spider-Man the way he should be. And the gameplay in this game is actually not that bad at all because it changes it up enough between the Ultimate Spider-Man, the futuristic Spider-Man 2099, all that stuff gets pretty much switched up enough to where this game is actually pretty fun and interesting. So it's not that bad of a game, even though it really doesn't have any like open world major swinging that we're used to in our Spider-Man games nowadays. It really wasn't a bad job from a graphical, artistic style, right? From a storyline perspective, the storyline was very simple, as I told you, but it was great. And the voice work was actually really good too. Stan Lee was also in this game as well. He kind of does the introduction and the ending. So that was pretty entertaining, which I enjoyed when playing this overall game. So let me see what else you guys are saying. Yeah. They are focused on different things in this game, and they all have special abilities, and they play differently as well, which adds part of the charm is that it does that, right? Like I did enjoy playing as Ultimate Spider-Man in that cartoonish art style, which aged pretty well. I mean, if you look at it, this is a PlayStation 3 game, but look at the graphics as of today. You'd say, hey, this looks like a modern game, but the art style that they had was pretty cool. And then looking at the neon aesthetic of Ultimate Spider-Man, which was played by, not Ultimate Spider-Man, but Spider-Man 2099, this voice actor was the Spider-Man from the 80s, which seemed really weird to hear that Spider-Man being played here, but it was still really cool just that they were able to get him to play Spider-Man as well. And again, it was just like a good combination, a good mix of different Spider-Man in a game. And I'll tell you, and I'll be totally honest, I never finished this game at all. I didn't. I played it and I was like, oh, that was pretty cool, but then I could never beat it, because life gets in the way and whatnot. So, but I definitely recommend Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions if you can get your hands on it. If you want to actually play in a game that's playing with the multiverse and actually have actors all come back to play these role of different Spider-Man, that it helped. It kind of satisfied the need of wanting to hear the original actor Christopher Daniel Barnes play Spider-Man yet again. But I still, it gets me in this inkling. It reminded me, especially Spider-Man No Way Home now is coming out and rumored to have all these Spider-Man actors come together. And then the fact that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, like the sequel's coming out, like a part 1 and a part 2. And because that movie's animated, my fingers are crossed. I don't know anything about that movie or much because, again, I want to avoid spoilers because it's so spoiler heavy. My fingers are crossed that that movie will have the return of Christopher Daniel Barnes, and hopefully, and maybe some of these other voice actors of Spider-Man 2, and hopefully get some resolution on Mary Jane and whatever happened to her. And if not, then I don't know what to do. But I will say that the fact that, and this is, I'll end it with this. And this is, it kind of upsets me. I'm kind of so emotional regarding this, but they decided to reignite the excitement that we have towards the 90s cartoons. Disney, and speaking about Disney, on Disney Plus, because they're bringing back X-Men 97. When X-Men 97 was announced, my first and most powerful reaction was, you're bringing back X-Men 97. Where is my Spider-Man? I need my last season of Spider-Man. Just give me that resolution. Let him find Mary Jane, or she can never find her again and she's gone for good. I understand Spider-Man goes through his drama, so if that happens, I get it. But let's finish that darn story, because having the last performance of Christopher Daniel Barnes be Spider-Man Noir, though it was nice to hear him back in that role, it's kind of upsetting that it still doesn't conclude his story, which his story deserves one heck of a conclusion, because he just does such an amazing job as Spider-Man, and I just want to see that. And hopefully that new Into the Spider-Verse movie will, fingers crossed, return him at the very least, and at the most give us a new season, a final season of Spider-Man the Animated Series, the way it deserved, after it was unfortunately canceled by Fox Kids because the president of Fox Kids just had an argument with Avi Arad, and because of that argument, she's like, I'm ending your show. What? Anyway, thank you for listening to me rant, and yes, this is me checking out on my channel, at least for the next maybe week or so, up until after Spider-Man No Way Home, and for the holidays too. I might take a break, so I might not be back till early next year, and gosh, I got so much content for you guys in that period. So thank you as always. This is Magnus. You make my day if you subscribe today or follow me on Twitch, because I'm streaming there too. But that's it. See you guys next time.